Max, dude, now that I'm taking a good look at you, the beard and the hair are absolutely on point. Let's tone down the Riz. Okay, let's get into the video. That's enough of that shit.
So the war within Season 1 LFG for Mythic Plus is pretty much really quiet, and it hasn't been so quiet in LFG Mythic Plus in a long while. And today in this video I want to talk about why and how Blizzard can actually fix Mythic Plus for Season 2 and beyond for the war within. Because
before he goes any farther, I have heard this in the high-end community a lot. I have heard from the high-end community that the group finder is turbo dead. Now, there's a few parts of this, and I don't think he's going to address this in this interview. Let me actually look at the... Yeah, he's not... Okay, so this is purely about WoW's game design choices. I do think that there are things that happen outside of WoW that could also, like, reduce participation in the game. Like, for example, I think there's a world where you have the best Mythic Plus season ever, and it comes out at a perfect time when there's not a lot else going on, and it's poppin' and it stays poppin', and then you release that exact same system with the exact same game design, and instead there's a bunch of content happening in classic hardcore, and PoE 2 comes out, and Marvel Rivals comes out, or like in 2018 Fortnite comes out, and like there's just, and some of those things are like more closely related to a MMORPG player than others, but like, you see what I'm saying? Like, do you guys remember when everyone went and played Final Fantasy in 9.1? Like, maybe 9.1, well, 9.1 is one of the worst patches ever, but like, let's say it wasn't. I still think that it would have seen really low participation because of all the like lawsuit stuff with Blizzard, and like really bad time to be Blizzard rep, and like people were just like playing other games, and all of that like kind of worked together. But I do think that like that matters too. So like right now, I don't think WoW's Mythic Plus, it sounds like I'm not the person that should be making the overall call on this. I do barely any Mythic Plus. Take my opinion and all opinions with a grain of salt. But it's possible that Mythic Plus right now is really dead. And maybe it's not all on Mythic Plus because... Or not all, right? Because there's other things taking people away from being in the group finder as well. All right. That rant, let ads stop. Let's go.
let's face it, Mythic Plus and Season 1 just isn't enjoyable. I've made a very comprehensive list of all the things
I've heard from Dorky that he's still like, Dorky still wants to log in and play. Like if he had, I think I saw him doing this in his Discord the other day. He was in there with 4 other people, and like, it's just that there aren't other people that are in there to play, but he still wants to like DPS and play high keys. He's having like tons of fun. Again, that's not all players. That's a like high key player, but even he has said it just felt like the motivation is low.
I think Blizzard should address, and this video is not meant to be a criticism of Blizzard. I actually think that since the Dark...
It's absolutely a criticism of Blizzard, but also that's okay. It is perfectly okay, you know? If you're someone that only ever criticizes people probably aren't going to take you very seriously. But like if you see both sides of it and you're positive and negative and just try to give your real take, it is perfectly okay to criticize decisions they've made. That's very real. That's true of all of us.
Days of Shadowlands, you have been listening to the community, and this is the reason why it's worth the trouble putting together a video like this with clearly timestamp sections as well as notes on screen that you can follow. And so hopefully when the War Within Season 2 rolls around, you can actually look at some of these issues that are not only brought up by me, but
oh, I didn't mean to pause it.
Also brought up by my community and the broader M Plus community in terms of what needs to change in Mythic Plus and why it feels bad right now. I know some of you are listening, especially those who have, we have had a sidebar about this, but I hope this video will be way more helpful just based on the timestamp sections. So let's dive right in. So the first big issue has got to do with gearing being absolutely broken. One of the first things to consider is whether Valor Stones is even necessary as a currency. I think if you remove Valor Stones today, nobody would really mind.
Yeah, so true.
Maybe let it apply for the lowest item tracks only, the ones on the lowest item tracks.
Yeah, actually, I think Valor Stones maybe didn't feel terrible in like the first 2 weeks. Like I'm talking like not even in the season, like before you had season gear. But I don't even know if they felt good or if they just like made sense. Like I guess Valor Stones in a perfect world reward you for playing different parts of the game. PvP, Mythic Plus, raiding, world quests, doing literally anything is going to give you Valor Stones, right? Doing world events. As long as it like does it sufficiently to where you don't need to worry about it, or whenever you need to go get it, you can actually get a lot of it, you know? Like doing a world quest and getting 30 Valor Stones when you need 300 is like just an insanely totally missing why people do stuff like that, or missing the point, really. But I do completely agree with him. If you removed Valor Stones, who the fuck out there is going to be like, oh man, The answer is no. There's no one's going to be like that. Like maybe a game developer, because like I think having a currency that you get for playing the game and then it matters that you have it just sounds like a good idea. But the way it actually works with players is you ignore it when you have enough of it. And it is the most stressful and annoying thing ever when it's the thing you need and you have to go actively farm it. Like it is actively bad. Part of that is the cap. You could be sitting at cap forever. And then he mentions that here. But it's just, I mean, he's so right. You remove Valor Stones, no one's mad. I just don't think it works. Totally agree. I'll let him finish his thoughts.
On that, you don't need Valor Stones as a currency because you already have Crest. Alternatively,
like someone in chat says, I don't even think about it. I get capped all the time. Okay, but like, where's the argument that it's good though? Like, it does affect some people negatively and it can affect you negatively. But like, if you're always capped on it and you always have enough, does it matter that you even have it? Like, basically what you're saying is I always have enough Valor Stones to where I can ignore it. But like, what good is it doing though? Like, do you feel dopamine when you're getting Valor Stones? Like, every activity you're doing, it makes you feel like you're at least gearing towards something, and that maybe, right? That's the only argument I could imagine. But, like, if you have enough of it, there's no positive. Like, you're in the best case scenario, and there's no positive.
Increase the Valor Stone cap or allow us to transfer Valor Stones from other Warband characters. You created Warbands for a reason, you might as well let us use it. The Crest drop rate is absolutely terrible. I think you need to drop more Crest per key at a baseline level. As of 5th of December 2024, you need to do 98 Mythic Plus Keystones if you have a
that's
fresh
insane.
ult at +8 or higher to cap all your gilded crest. If you ask me to play 98 Mythic Plus keys before I can catch up...
Dude, okay, he's using 98 now. Bro, like 2 months ago, it was still like 50 or 40. And that's still like, regardless of him highlighting 98 here, what it really says is enough to not even start. It doesn't matter what the number is, X Mythic Plus keys. But if that number is enough to not even start that journey because it's just so ridiculous, you're just not going to do it. Like, obviously, there needs to be the Crest drop rate more baseline. I think Crest drop rate kind of makes sense at the beginning of the season. I think Dratnos put it really well. He said, like, the way that Crests and gear upgrades work for the first, like, month, specifically on your main, feels fine, but not on alts, and it's felt worse on mains since then because it's just so repetitive. We can also talk about how far the Mythic track goes and stuff like that, but... yeah, I mean, that's insane. They've needed to have some way to, like, either, like, go past your cap. Like, if you're capped on Gilded, but you're still doing content that drops it, it should still be, like, accumulating in your warbank, so you can just, like, give it to one of your alts maybe, and maybe at a higher rate. But, like, one thing is for sure, if you're starting your main or your alt this late into the season and you're that far behind, there's no reason why you should not be getting crests at an extremely accelerated rate than you would at the beginning. Because, yeah, it's like you're putting in less work by playing later in the patch, but at least you'll play at all instead of just see the number and be like, I'm never going to do that.
In terms of gear, I might as well quit the season and go play in Season 2 instead. It's just too much work to catch up on our ults. Alternatively, you can buff, let's say, Gilded Crest drop rates on our ults as well. The Crest discount achievement for ults is absolutely just nonsense. The Harbinger achievement for Gilded at 639 eye level in every single slot in order to have discounted Gilded Crest for my ults is really dumb because your crafted gear is 636 eye level. So that means that I kind of need to wait for my vault to give me 639 myth track or pray I'm lucky in raid to get 639 in every single slot. And by the time I eventually unlock my Gilded discount for my ults, the season is probably close to...
Was it Dorky said, I remember saying how dog shit the Crest grind was in an early Potty C episode and everyone told me you were wrong. Wait, what? Dork, are you making that up? Me and Dratnos told you were wrong when you said the Crest grind was bad? I have been on the Crest grind is dog shit since like season 3 of Dragonflight. Dratnos was arguing how casuals love it. Okay, so when you said everyone, you meant just Dratnos. Oh, the commenters as well, and the comments were hating on you. All right, stay mad then. Pull those receipts out. Yeah, I mean, you have to think though. Dratnos is often right, and he is the man of the people. So we'd have to see.
Over. So why should I be playing ults instead? The Harbinger achievement for Gilded Crest discount should actually be 636 eye level for all slots. Your crafting can naturally then get you to 636, and that ensures that everyone can get discounts on Gilded for your ult. Alternatively, buff your crafting to max eye level. Why is crafting capped at 636? Buff it to 639. Crafting crest is too expensive, so
wait, let me see if I hear what he said again at the end.
Capped for your ult. Alternatively, buff your crafting to max eye level. Why is crafting capped at 636? Buff it to 639.
I don't actually agree with that part, specifically the craft. Okay, so I totally agree and have been advocating for the first part. Like, getting the Harbinger of the Gilded or whatever should 100% be gotten easier. The fact that you can have a 636 eye level best in slot crafted piece that's literally better than every 639 that is available in the patch, and that doesn't unlock it for you, and now you have to RNG somehow get a 639 for that slot is obviously stupid. So totally right on this first point. I don't know about crafting 639 just base. I think, like, at least early in the season, I don't really like that. I like the fact that crafting can get you like 99% to the best piece, but there's potentially a 639 to chase that would be slightly better. But I do agree that at a certain point in the patch, though, that should change. Like, they could actually make crafting, like, I don't even know, like, a certain amount of months into the patch, crafting can actually go up 3 more eye levels now. But I don't know if that would feel that good at the beginning. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily be fully against it. I understand why crafting is 3 levels lower. And there's other ways to solve the, like, gilded. It's a way to solve the gilded thing, but I don't think it's necessary, like, completely necessary.
Crafting crest is too expensive, so every other week you can craft because you have a spark.
What does it sounds like a take to keep the people down? I mean, like, okay, if every single crafted piece can be 639, that means that every single piece of gear that you want is crafted. That means that every single slot is bis. I like the idea that it's like, if your character is full 636 crafted, that you have an awesome character that's like almost as good as it could be, and I'm talking like just barely. Like, probably not even enough to where, like, if you played better than someone else with 639, like, you could just beat them. But I like the idea that there is something potentially slightly better that you could get out of your vault, that you could get from raid, right? That is better than that. But I think later in the patch it's less egregious, but I think it makes the beginning of the patch more interesting to not just like craft a piece and be that many items and be done with it.
However, to craft your 636, you need to do 7.5 keystones at +8 or higher to get gilded, which is 90 gilded crest, because you drop 12 gilded crest per completed and time key. That is just way too expensive. Why is crafting so expensive in terms of crest? Maybe change the amount of crest that's required, because for me to go through
crafting crafting a 636 requires 90 12 keys to be done, i.e. 7.5 keystones before you get your body. Oh, so I get it. So just to do that, I thought he was going to talk about like crafting in general was too expensive, but I don't know if that's a huge criticism I'd agree with. But we don't even need to talk about that because that's just not even
keys to fuel my bi-weekly upgrade. It's kind of a very slow reward system. The next thing is targeted slots and item upgrades. I think a lot of people enjoyed the Dragonflight Season 4 bullions and the old dinar system where I have a guaranteed way to get a certain item, trinket, or a slot upgrade. I understand you don't want to give loot out. Totally understandable. Some people think that raiding should have additional perks and incentive. I can totally see that. That's fine. However, when your season is absolutely dead, like if I were to pull up LFG right now and I search for keys between a certain range, you will see that it's way lower participation rate than usual. During the lull of a season, maybe you introduce bullions and dinars. This could...
I would agree with that. I mean, I've asked them this question in like, I think 2 or 3 interviews, where it's like, hey, so bullions and dinars are sick. Any chance we can get those in a regular season? And their answer is always like, the reason they're here now is because like it's a rotating raid week and we don't want, where it's rotating raids every week, and you know, there's a reason it's this. And it's like, okay, yeah, we get all of that. But you know, I think asking the question of, is there a point in the season where you can introduce it? Like right now, if they were just to announce, hey guys, bullions are coming out next week, I think that would really help Mythic Plus players, right? Because you just have a way to get that stuff. Especially because like how much they rely on the vault, pure Mythic Plus. But also you have to think about Blizzard's game design. They don't want people to pure Mythic Plus. They don't want people to purely raid. They want you to feel like you do both, which is, I think, fine. But that's clearly what they're pushing you to do. But I think at a certain point in the season, it would be nice to do that for the players. I'm trying to think of what negatives would be there from Blizzard's end. It's like, oh, well, people feel like they're going to stop playing early in the patch and just wait for dinars to come out. But like, I think that isn't a bad thing because like giving something later into the patch for people to look forward to, I think is actually really good. Like, I don't know if that really exists right now. I think for the casual audience, it exists in like the 0.0, 0.5s and 0.0.7 patches, because like they're actually releasing like targeted new content. But for like the Mythic Pluser, I think it would be kind of nice for sure. Was it the bad part of that would be it would devalue the gear you've grinded before you've added that stuff? Not really, because like they're not gonna, you're not going to just get every single item you're going to get from Booleans. It'll just be how you get your Mythic Spy Masters probably, or it'll be how you get like this Mythic item that you've been too hard to get, or like a Mythic Plus item that just has never dropped in the vault, which is actually like really common for that not to happen, right? I don't know if I agree with that. Plus, it's like, what are you going to do for the next 2 months of the patch anyway, you know? I think like easing up later in the patch is like just a good thing. I think they should heavily consider that. They could just let you use your coins from shitty vaults to buy gear later in the patch. Yeah, I mean, that's just adding dinar, right? And that's been suggested. I've actually suggested that exact idea to them. Basically, the question was, can the Great Vault, failing your Great Vault currency, be upgraded in a way to where there's basically more options to spend? And I think way back in the day, some of the options were like you can use them to add tertiaries to a piece of gear potentially. They've nerfed tertiaries since then, and they've also like kind of stated that I don't think they'd ever want to do that. But then another example was dinar. Like imagine you fail 2 or 3 weeks of a vault, right? Like this is usually not the case early in a season for most players. Like usually this would happen like 1.5 to 2 months in anyway, but like that's a lot of currency, right? Like where you're choosing not to get a socket and you're like, okay, there's this really awesome trinket that I need for Mythic Plus, and it's like so fucking good, and I'm just never gonna get this on Mythic in my vault, and like you kind of like save up for it, and that becomes Booleans. But I think like that's really hard to tune, because you also wouldn't want people bricking good vaults just to save up, you know? But like obviously I think that's like probably a bad decision early. Like if you're throwing away Mythic tier early to save up the brick things for the one trinket, like that's just an objectively bad decision, you know? But like they'd have to tune it like that. But yeah, you could also freeze. Yeah, adding a Hearthstone like freeze mechanic to the vault. Like you see 2 things you want, and next week, as long as you were to fill that vault slot naturally, like you will always get that one item in there. That would be great. Yeah, multiple.
Also be unlocked when Hall of Fame is filled. So the season is kind of over already. People are kind of checking out. Would you rather lose players to play Path of Exile 2 or retain? People are kind of checking out. Would you rather lose players to play Path of Exile?
Well, you mentioned Hall of Fame. Like Hall of Fame's already finished, so people are checking out for the season. This isn't actually like the main point he's making, but I actually find that fascinating. Is that true? Like, do people raid and you have like a weekly raid all the time, and then Hall of Fame fills, and now your raid is like, okay, well, we didn't make Hall of Fame, so I guess we're quitting? Has that happened to your all's guilds where like you want to get Hall of Fame and then you don't, so then you just stop raiding and don't finish? I've never even heard of that happening, but I'm sure that, because like a lot of people get cutting edge after that. Maybe it's just like whenever the Hall of Fame fills, that just marks like a point in the season when most people are like kind of over it anyway. Because I really doubt that the Hall of Fame filling specifically is actually what makes people stop. That sounds strange to me. Like when Path of Exile, I mean, yeah, we talked about this at the beginning of the season, or the beginning of this video. Path of Exile coming out is a huge deal. There's a ton of WoW players not logging into WoW right now to play Path of Exile 100p. Same thing with classic WoW hardcore and stuff. Although I think classic WoW hardcore probably trends more as like an interesting Twitch thing to follow along and be involved in the drama with and stuff like that, rather than it is people actually playing classic hardcore. Is that you think that's a fair assumption? Like if you were to try to perfectly relate Twitch viewership to how much people are playing a game, that can be accurate sometimes, but I think with classic, I think there's significantly more people watching and following along than actually playing it themselves. But I have heard that people are playing not the hardcore version, but just the fresh classic thing a lot too. So there's what are you saying? I think he's just saying there's no worry about the competition after Hall of Fame is finished. Yeah, I still don't really understand that though, but.
2 or retain players.
Max, your chat on the screen is
you decide. The other way to think about targeted slots and item upgrades, we have vault tokens. Let us use our vault tokens for more than just sockets on our head.
Facts. We just talked about this.
And on our braces.
Quazii.
Maybe you give us vault token currencies where I can use my currencies to re-roll my vaults. Maybe I do not know. Making stuff up. X amount of vault tokens, I can refresh this entire row from Mythic Plus at reset. Or using a specific amount of tokens, I can target a myth track unlock on a...
Wait, someone in chat said, I would bet infinity money more people who play retail are currently playing the Anniversary Classic server than 11.0. Wow, if that's true, that is fascinating to me. Not like there's more people playing Anniversary Classic than like 11.1, but like the release of this expansion, that's like way more popular than I would have thought. That sounds crazy.
Slot. Maybe. Something to think about. Give people a reason to do weekly keys. I think that's needed. M plus rewards.
Homie, absolutely no one is playing retail right now. Oh yeah, that's including me. But we're not talking about right now. We're talking at 11.0, right?
Improvement. We have talked about this. I know Ion Hazikostas made a statement about this. Season 2, you're looking at Mythic Plus rewards being changed. That's great. But the point is, and you probably already know this, between Portal unlocking at plus 10 and between that and the top 0.1% in Mythic Plus getting the title, we need more.
Another thing with that too is like a way for me to gauge like overall WoW interest has been to look at Race to World first viewership, like in the intro raid expansion or the intro expansion raid, like the first raid, and comparing that. And that was the same as it was last time. Like overall, or I mean, it's just kind of always grown. But also I don't know if that necessarily tracks. Like I think it's very possible that someone is like, oh, I'm not playing this upcoming WoW expansion, but I'm always going to watch the race. So that's probably not a good metric, but that's the one I look at just because it's the closest related to me.
Incentives to play Mythic Plus. Season-specific cosmetic sets, for example.
Oh, what is that? Oh, okay. So the guy clarifies his comment. I didn't mean all of 11.0. I just meant right now. Oh, I would also bet infinity money that right now people are playing more fresh classic, the new content. But that's also probably could be true of like every single retail and classic release for the last at least 4 years, not 6 years, not when classic first came out. But like if you notice that WoW releases things in like waves, they do like retail thing, classic thing, retail thing, classic thing. And I would bet just over the last 4 years, 90+% of the time, during the time when they release the fresh thing for either game mode, there are more people actively playing that mode at that time. And then it just switches to the other thing, which is also, I think, what Blizzard wants, because that will, I think that's their entire, when they brought Classic back, I think that's what they wanted to achieve. But right now, retail's especially dead. Right now, this feels reminiscent. I don't think the game is as bad as it was then. Like 9.1 was an actively bad patch, but the amount of people logging in and playing retail right now feels like 9.1
score, or call it whatever. This is made up, right? You decide the score. It could be tiered, I don't know, 2,800, 3,000, 3,200. It's entirely up to you. Bring back stuff like challenge mode skins, season-specific rewards like pets, mounts. You are doing housing in a big way. Everyone's excited about midnight housing.
I totally forgot about housing.
You might as well give us like, I don't know, furniture in the future, or something even simple. Doesn't even cost you a lot of money. Warband loading screens, weapon transmogs. All these doesn't cost you money. You just need an artist to basically put in a mob. It's really not that difficult. Now moving on to there being too much pain and punishment in Mythic Plus Season 1 for the War Within. Challenges, perils, penalty, I think needs to be revisited. The M Plus community fears making mistakes more than ever. Each wipe.
Yeah, that was a massive shift this season. They made deaths significantly more impactful, so it's like more stressful to worry about whether you're dying or not for more players. At the same time as they increased the amount of things that the packs are doing significantly, and they made it harder to tank and then by proxy harder to heal. So like those things all kind of work off of each other, right? They all individually are bad. Well, no, bad or good is whatever, but they all individually do their own thing, but they all make each other worse, right? And then on top of all of that, if you deplete a key, you get less rewards too, which is like so much more likely. It's just a huge change to make all at one time.
Is 1.5 minutes off the timer for the key. If you include the 5 times 15 seconds of penalty plus the run back from the dungeon.
And for the first month, you had to do a higher key than ever to get the best crest. So people who are harder to tank, it's harder to tank, the dungeons are doing more, and they're punishing you more for dying, are doing harder content than they've ever had to do to get the best gear in the game. It was a recipe for disaster, right?
In fact, 1.5 minutes is a bit too generous. There are certain dungeons, call it, let's say Grim Battle, where if you wipe on a certain pack, you're running back all the way from the start of the dungeon. That's too punishing. And because it's so punishing, people are very fearful of making mistakes more so than ever. Because it's so costly to make mistakes now, everyone is more motivated now, more than ever, to invite meta specs only. Because you want to maximize the amount of chances you time the key. You also will then gatekeep way more with score. You screen everyone's, I don't know, history of playing Mythic Plus as though you're trying to date someone in Mythic Plus. This is kind of making the meta situation way worse.
Wait.
Date someone in time the key.
Wait a second. Wait a fucking second.
You also will then gatekeep way more with score. You screen everyone's, I don't know, history of playing Mythic Plus as though you're trying to date someone in Mythic Plus.
Oh, okay. So he said the dating in Mythic Plus thing, like, you're looking so deep into them instead of just like accepting people who sign up. But when he said date with Mythic Plus, I just immediately made me think of that, like, the dating drama in Mythic Plus this patch and like feeding people monster bird style. And I thought he was actually referring to that, but he was just using it as a way to, I don't know. Anyway, that was funny to me.
This is kind of making the meta situation way worse. And because mystics are way more costly, nobody wants to play the high stress roles. Tanks and healers, which by the way, I will elaborate way later on.
What does monster bird style mean? You know what? I could explain it to you, and maybe you want me to, but I promise you, you do not want me to explain what I'm talking about.
I think the tank tuning was an absolute failure leading into the War Within. It was well-intentioned, you were coming from a good place, but it didn't hit the mark. The 15 seconds death timer is also way too costly because, again, it's punishing. Scale it back maybe. You can have this a fix, but maybe look to scale it back. Speaking about running back and punishment, why is graveyard spawn points not unlocked after each boss? It's really inconsistent. There's some dungeons where, oh, you kill the boss, you unlock the graveyard. It should just be kill the boss, new graveyard unlocked. As simple as that. Runbacks.
Yeah, this is one of those, this is a take I've always had. I've had this kind of explained to me from a developer that this is like a challenge point between designing a dungeon for a certain feel and an aesthetic and a vibe versus like purely gameplay reasons. Like I'll give an example in Raid. Why doesn't this happen in Raid? If you just wanted the best gameplay experience, you would just spawn after a boss. The reason you spawn at the beginning and then you have like a bird fly you through the whole thing is purely because Blizzard wants to make raids feel massive and like immersive, and like you feel that when you wipe because you just you know, like you just see all of it and it adds to that kind of immersion. Now that's something that I don't agree with because I'm just a gameplay only dude, but I've had convincing arguments said to me that there's like a lot of people who play WoW that like really like that. I remember having the same thought when people were when I was asking about trash, and like I was convinced pretty heavily that like if they removed trash, like so many fucking people would be mad, and you'd never think that being in your own world, but like that just makes a raid feel like a raid to people basically. But Mythic Plus I don't think is the same. Like Mythic Plus is, you know, like, yeah, you want to have the vibes in the dungeons, and I think like there's a good example in, I think it's Stone Vault, when you get to one of the wings and you take the little mine cart back. Like that's the kind of stuff where they can use those transportation methods to make those dungeons feel unique and lived in, and immersion. Like you get immersion for like where you are and how it's different. So it's done for the same reason, but I do agree that in Mythic Plus specifically, it does feel too punishing and it's just really frustrating, I think. Because like in a raid, at least you can have white protection. You can have a Warlock Soul someone and res everyone and save that time, but there's no way to actually outplay it in Mythic Plus, so I think it's significantly more impactful. And like, I don't know, like maybe there's a world for immersion in like the regular dungeon. I would actually argue that most of the people who heavily favor being immersed in a game like this would actually really care that that's how the game worked in a regular dungeon, like a heroic or a normal or what used to be Mythic 0, right? Like that. But I don't think a lot of players who really care about that actually, which again is the majority of players in the game, one could argue, they're not going to be doing like, as soon as the content becomes timed, it just feels like it doesn't fit for me.
Just feels bad. The idea of hitting the release button as a group of 5 and running back, it doesn't make the experience any better. It's not as though we're going to reflect on our mistakes while running back and go like, that was a mistake and I've learned.
Yeah, but I don't think that's why they make you do that. Like, I don't think they intend for you to communicate about that on the runback.
That doesn't help anyone. It just brings the mood down. Respawn point after each boss. Depletion of keys. Totally understand that we need depletion to give sticks in Mythic Plus. Without depletion, as some people have rightly pointed out, Mythic Plus would literally be you going into a menu selecting, I want to do a plus 13 or plus 14 or plus 15, and you just keep doing the same pool over and over again until you figure it out. And that might not be fun. I totally get that. And
yeah, that's actually a fascinating thought. That is... So I remember asking Dorky about a certain like raid boss he was doing. Like he was just not having fun with Silken Court. Although Silken Court is a very specific kind of raid boss, like very different, very Final Fantasy-like. But he's like, yeah, I don't know. I like raiding as long as we're killing bosses fast, but as soon as you're pulling bosses hundreds of times, which I think in this argument can roughly be equated to as soon as you're pulling bosses and you're spending the entire raid night or multiple doing one single fight, that gets boring to you, which actually shows you how important depletion is to Mythic Plus. Because let's just say you're doing that in Mythic Plus, right? Like in Mythic Plus, if you're going to play with a group for 3 hours, you're going to be going to all different kinds of keys. You're going to do one key, either time it or deplete it, and then go to the next. And in a way, the fact that there's variety built in makes it so much more replayable. And that, I think, specifically for him, is why Mythic Plus is more fun than like a hard raid boss, because it just simply has more variety. Where if you were to remove depletion, it would become raiding, right? You would just do the same key with the same people, trying some really hard pull that would make the timer possible, or a harder pull, and you would just keep resetting until you get it, and it would feel like wiping on a raid boss and pulling it again, which is, I think, precisely why Mythic Plus is more replayable. Is like there's a lot of improvising. You know, you have the same routes usually later in a season, but sometimes things happen and you have to just kind of figure it out. That hasn't exactly been how keys have gone like that before, and that just provides kind of infinite variety, and it's not like a raid wipe thing where you just like do the same thing over and over again. So I think that aspect of depletion has been really successful. I think he's right about that.
I think people get that. So you need depletion for stakes. And Mythic Plus is fun because there's like this risk versus reward thing. However, depletion can be improved. Lower keys like class 12 and below, maybe you give people 2 or 3 chances before the key depletes. It could be 2 or, it could be more. Point is
depleting more punishing to the people looking to get portals than it is for higher keys, maybe?
Maybe give people a certain amount of chances, so it's not so punishing. You want to remove some of the punishment involved in depletion. For the high key pushers, maybe 13 and beyond, you can let them suffer because they are high key pushers. They love to suffer, and that's why they're doing high keys. You can do the...
Yeah, that's a way to look at it. People who are doing high keys simply love to suffer. I mean, that sounds ridiculous. It is kind of true. That's not, it sounds insane, but...
usual depletion, but you should look at the data for Mythic Plus. Where's the bulk of your population playing? You probably want to make it a bit easier on them. Depleted keys, more importantly, should still give usual crest rewards. Why is depleted keys giving 5 crest instead of the usual 12 crest?
This is an indefensible correct take. Like, sorry, trying to argue against what he's saying right now would be indefensible. The fact that crests give you 2 things. The fact that you get less crests for depleting is criminal, and the fact that you don't get more crests for doing a higher key above like an 8, which is I think the lowest one that drops it. Like if you time an 8 and it gives you 12 crests, and you time a fucking 15, why does a 15 give you 12 crests? That's ludicrous. You should be rewarded for being able to do higher content more efficiently if that's what you so choose to do, right? It just like the rewards to difficulty doesn't add up. That should scale,
That makes absolutely no sense. The key is already depleted. People already feel bad, and you're punishing people for getting...
You feel... Okay, so generally, yes, you feel bad, but like I think part of Mythic Plus is just the best way to play this game endlessly, and I don't think that depletion is just pure sadness, because I think a lot of the reason people are playing Mythic Plus, yes, you are driven by getting more score, more rewards, but it's also just kind of the most fun way to infinitely replay the game. And I've like depleted keys that went decently well and was kind of challenging, and we almost timed it, and I had fun in that key. I don't feel eternal sadness because, well, also, maybe I'm different because I'm not really motivated by score. Mythic Plus score means nothing to me. I'd purely do Mythic Plus just to have fun playing the game. Some patches, that means I play for 2 months. Sometimes it's a week or 2, right? But like, I think part of it is just being able to play the game and have fun. So I don't know if it's like pure sadness, but if your goal is purely to get score and nothing else, it would be.
Less currency.
But I think even people who play for score, like you wouldn't be at that point if you didn't just enjoy the gameplay along the way, right? Like I still think Mythic Plus is just so dominated by just having a general understanding or appreciation for just WoW gameplay and really, really liking WoW gameplay, and that is really what drives it.
On completing the key, it is no wonder everyone is leaving your keys. Nobody wants to stay after a wipe, everyone just leaves. And that experience is terrible because they have to find a new group, and God knows it's so hard to get into a group right now, especially if you're pugging. This cycle is just a vicious cycle. So make crest drop the normal amount regardless of whether you deplete or not deplete. As long as you complete the key, usual crest rewards should be baseline. You want people to finish your keys. Also, M Plus is kind of too expensive. But think about it, right? M Plus is kind of expensive. There's flask, there's food, there's enchant, there's weapon oils, there's runes, and at the end of it, you get 50 gold if you don't loot any item. That is barely enough to cover the repair cost. In fact, I'm losing money while doing Mythic Plus. So I don't know, maybe give a sweetener.
You're a streamer, you're making money, buddy. Fuck out of here.
And complete the dungeon. The NPC at the end of the dungeon gives a free repair. Something like that. Mobs recasting after AoE stops is a mistake. So the change that you made in the War Within is that an important cast is about to go off. If you stun or stop with crowd control, the mob simply recast the ability. In the past, in Dragonflight and before, you will put the mob's ability, the important ability, on cooldown. Let's say if I crowd control it. That was a way better system. The reason why it feels bad right now is that everyone knows there's an important cast coming, so everyone saves their interrupts. And in the event that someone doesn't track the interrupt tracker and uses a AoE crowd control, all the interrupts go on cooldown and the crowd control is used, guess what? It feels bad because the ability is going to be recasted and it's a wipe. Recognize that most of your M+ community doesn't use voice comms. I get you want to encourage people to make friends and get into voice comms, that's great, but there are other ways to do so. I feel like you should.
What are those other ways? Because that is their main thing they want to do. I think they definitely overstepped, but like Blizzard, if they can, the best way to put this, we were talking about this on the podcast a couple weeks ago, where Dorky and Dranos, we were like, would you guys still play WoW if you didn't have to play with your friends? Like if you weren't in comms with your friends playing with them? And they both immediately said no. And I would absolutely say no. That didn't start that way, but like that is the thing. I think Blizzard knows that you are so much more likely to keep playing WoW if you can find friends to play it with. I think that's probably true of maybe every game, but I think this is certainly a game where that's true. So them creating content that deliberately tries to force you to interact and communicate and become friends with people in the game is maybe the most important thing to them. And maybe that's a reason why they did this. That's why they improved the in-game voice tool, which is actually really good, but just no one uses it. And I understand why. I'm not trying to get into voice all the time, but yeah, it's complicated. I think you could even argue it's kind of doing the opposite because they did this. If you would argue that they were to do this to get people in comms, I think it's just making people before still that weren't in comms not go into comms, but now the content's just more miserable because of how not possible it is to do outside of comms. So they might want to change their approach to that. I don't know if that would be good or not because again, you'd be having less people communicate and maybe meet each other, but would the game how much better would the game be if the game was reasonably able to be completed without being in communication? But then like in Mythic Plus, that's not a reality, right? Like no matter what you do in that way, Mythic Plus is just, it's an infinitely scaling game mode, right? Meaning that the content will literally be impossible at some point, and the closer it gets to impossible, the higher you go, the more communication would be needed to consistently do it. So that would never even change it anyway. So I don't know.
Revert back to the old system of a crowd control is equivalent to an interrupt where it puts the mob's ability on cooldown, and you should also explore partial refund on interrupts. If I interrupt something, it whiffs. I don't need my interrupt.
You know what's funny? You guys are saying I love doing Mythic Plus for 50 gold at the end. I've never thought about how much gold Mythic Plus gives you when you complete it, ever. But it is kind of insane that you are spending so much to do it and not getting anything back.
Back on use, but maybe half the duration of the cooldown, perhaps. Think about that. The other thing is the tank tuning disaster.
What is it? Because you have infinite gold? Yeah, no, I know. I'm not saying that they're wrong. Guys, I know. I'm a privileged streamer guy, and I know. I just never thought about it.
When you first announced tank nerfs, a lot of people made videos about why this is such a bad idea, including myself. And there are some skeptics saying that Blizzard will get it right. But tank tuning has been a total disaster. And here's why. Let me
Before he gets into that, I'm sure he's right. I think the take was like, okay, the way it could have gone well is before you didn't have to be very good, but every single tank was self-sustainable. And if you were good, it like didn't help you express that skill level a lot. And I guess in a perfect world, when they nerf it, is it still possible with good skilled gameplay to be fully self-sufficient on most tanks? Some are designed kind of not to be, like Warrior. But like it's just harder to get to that point, so it makes tank skill more important. And I could see a world where they would have a conversation about that, and that's the conclusion they came to. But I would agree that it does seem like it is a massive failure because, I don't know, just making it... It just made the hardest role in Mythic Plus significantly harder. I want to hear what he says about it.
Quote you some of the language you used. You explicitly stated that you would want to smooth out the damage that tanks and parties will take. And tanks will take more damage overall, but shouldn't die significantly more often versus Dragonflight. The percentage of damage they take after mitigation from steady damage sources like physical attacks would be your primary objectives. Totally get that. I understand the rationale. Like I said, I think the tank nerfs are well-intentioned because tanks were pulling the whole dungeon and being immortal and the party was struggling. I totally get the nerf, the rationale behind it. But again, if you read some of the things that you wanted, tank damage intake should be steady and not too fast. You want to smooth out the rate tanks take damage to reduce surprise or spiky deaths. Tanks will have strong answers to threats or periods of danger, but less sustained self-healing. And tanks will still have cooldowns or emergency self-heals, like renewal or impending victory. So let me tell you.
So we've actually talked about this on the podcast. There's most of the things that they stated as goals, there were a few that actually did happen, but most of them were like basically the opposite effect happened. The things they wrote in bold here, like most of them is just simply not how it played out. So it is, I think it is kind of objectively a failure because they stated what they were changing and what the desired cause and effect was, and it just simply didn't go that way. And it was a lot worse. So this is very warranted criticism. Dude, it's living rent-free in my head why at the beginning of this video said this video is not meant to critique Blizzard. Why did he say that? Because, like, this is a critique of Blizzard. And also, it is perfectly fair and reasonable to do that. You know what I mean? Is it the same vibe as, like, when people make videos about a certain person that's, like, kind of negative, but then at the beginning they say a disclaimer, like, hey, this video is purely meant to be informative. Please don't hate on this person, as a way to, like, protect themselves if people hate on them. But, like, it's going to actually do nothing about people hating on them at all. But it's, like, it's a way to, like, separate themselves from it, you know? Like, it'll be a video titled, like, the downfall of this person who did some really shitty thing. And then at the beginning, they're like, by the way, this isn't meant to send any hate their way, even though it obviously will. And, like, that won't do anything, but they just say it anyway. Is it like the talking about a game company version of that? Sorry, I don't know why. Like, when he said that earlier, I was just like, why would you even need to say this isn't a critique when it is? And then also that isn't even a bad thing. That's totally fine.
For high frequency tank.
What is it? I think he's making it clear that this isn't just a rational Blizzard hate and dooming. But making yourself clear about that doesn't matter. Like, if you are being an irrational Blizzard hater doomer guy, that will be clear in the way that you're speaking, or it will be clear that that's not. If you're being objective and, like, trying to, you know, be fair to every party, that will only be relevant in the way that you are speaking about it, and the viewer or the listener making that assumption for themselves. Telling people your intention of that is completely irrelevant, right?
Busters across 5 out of 8 of your dungeons does not relate to the language you use here. It's almost as though the person who wrote these article, these languages, these paragraphs is someone from the PR department, and the person didn't talk to the person from the balancing department. It's someone from the PR.
There's that. Wait, is he saying that's what he thinks this is, or is he saying that's the best, like, argument he could give them? Because I can tell you that these kind of things are not written by the fucking PR department. These are directly from game designers, and they're telling you about the changes they made and why they would make them.
PR
See
department
if I misheard that.
does not relate to the language you use here.
I think they were just wrong.
It's almost as though the person who wrote these article, these languages, these paragraphs is someone from the PR department.
Oh, he said it's almost as like, okay, he's not implying they were, because that would be insane. Yeah, I get that. They're like, no, I think I remember reading this article and challenging some of the things they said. I think this is exactly written from game designers. In fact, I'm positive that's true. And the people who made these changes, because why else would they be talking about it? And that's also just how communication is done there. And I think if you want to make any, they were just wrong. Right?
The person didn't talk to the person from the balancing department.
Yeah, but he's saying they're so wrong that a PR guy might as well have wrote it. Yeah.
Because if you think about your 5 dungeons out of 8 dungeons in Dragonflight, not the War Within Season 1, Grim Patrol, you have Flame Renders who are doing slashes, Magical Tank Busters every 18 seconds, and there's 2 Flame Renders in certain packs. Then you have Molten Giants who do a Lava Fist every 15 seconds. If you try doing a key on, like, I don't know, 13, 14, 15 and above, without mitigations, you just get 1 shot. Enforcers, they just stay in melee range, they gain stacks, and they just do increasing damage to a tank, and they absolutely demolish them. So again, think back about your language. Tank damage intake should be steady, not too fast, but yet your high frequency tank busters is resulting in tanks dying significantly way more. Totally opposite from what you're saying in the first screen grab here.
Has a point, counterpoint. They need to try to make the damage that tanks take and try to live through not just pure white swing damage, and they have to try to vary it up a little bit, right? So, like, for example, someone's stacking and needing to kill a pack fast, and you have to, like, kind of make your cooldowns work towards the end instead of at the beginning. That's, like, a cool tank problem to solve. The issue isn't any of the things individually. It's how much you put into one pack and stuff like that. So I think it's certainly a mistake of them just putting those things at the same time. But also it's a key scaling problem, right? Like, that could be maybe fair. Maybe it wasn't, right? I didn't do keys before they nerfed this, I don't think. But it could be fair on, like, a 10 and then not in high scaling things. And they've always just kind of had an issue at, like, realizing exactly what's going to start scaling out of control multiple key levels earlier in keys. Like, kind of similar to, like, the Odin runes in Halls of Valor. How, like, that was just, like, the damage you took from that was just, like, whatever in, like, most keys that most people were doing. But, like, on high keys, like, the hardest thing in the dungeon was just getting your rune before you just died to that dot, you know, just, like, random shit like that. Can we confirm these devs even do high keys? We have done high keys with these developers, yeah.
Then you have Stone Vaults. Your Despoiler does Shadow Claw every 13 seconds. Machinist boss, Igneous Hammer every 12 seconds. City of Threats. Your first boss, Subjugate every 13 seconds. Shadow Crown boss, Obsidian Beam every 25 seconds. Guardian mobs in Mist of Turnersive. Don't know why you changed the mobs in Mist of Turnersive, but they do Anima Slashes every 12 seconds. And there's 2 Guardians in certain packs. And they stack the debuff. So what you're trying to say here doesn't relate to the design of your dungeons. And I think that needs to be...
Yeah, well, I think that might be... So one thing, Cam, he said like it's almost like a PR person wrote this. I think what actually might be the case is a class designer wrote this. And the examples you are giving are dungeon design problems. And those are 2 very different people and jobs at the company, even though they are closely related and matter. And maybe they have conversations about stuff like this. Those were actually written by 2 different people. Every example given, like, for example, examples of failures, at least when quoting the article, would be more something like the way that tanks are designed not being true with, which is probably correct, actually. Like, I bet that is correct. But like the examples are something else, which it is certainly a valid criticism that those 2 things would not work hand in hand, because how, you know, how your tank is how your character is able to mitigate damage versus the actual thing in the game that is doing damage to you are extremely closely related, but they are also not the same people.
Revisited. I don't think the tank
and there
healing
needs to
hit
not
the
be a
mark at all.
disconnect there.
Now, because of all these tank busters, LFG is now incentivized to bring healers with externals. You need to bring the meta healer, which is Discipline Priest as of now. They have 2 pain suppressions, 2 externals for the tank. This makes the whole meta situation even worse. But given all these tank buster...
Here we go again, the devs knight in shining armor called Max yapping defending. I'm not defending them. I think this is a big problem and they didn't do a very good job. But I also think it's relevant to point out that, you know, they're different people. But I mean, like, as a player, it doesn't matter, right? It's still a valid critique on Blizzard, right? I think it's good to know that those 2 things are done by 2 different types of people, and also know that it's a failure that those 2 things didn't, like, as a player, you just see the final product, which is a combination of those things. So their inability to communicate or to succeed on their stated goals of how this is going to work is a failure regardless. I still think it's worth pointing out that, you know, it's two different people. It's not the same people who wrote this who did this, you know.
Problems that is totally opposite from your initial tank tuning disaster kind of post. Nobody wants to play tanks because, again, every tank death is a wipe. It's at least a 1.5 minute off the timer.
I don't know if could they ever fix that? Is there a way to design World of Warcraft where that statement isn't true? Like, it's almost like that statement is a static thing. It will always be the case, and the only way to really play around it is to just make tanking less likely to wipe, like make it less likely to die as a tank, which is like kind of interesting that that's the opposite of what they do here, right?
To blame the tank for breaking the key. Nobody likes to get abused, so nobody play tanks. LFG groups cannot form. No Mythic Plus groups can form. Nobody gets to play. Everybody pays their sub for a queue simulator. Same problem with healers. Lack of healers in LFG. Tank healing feels awful. There's no agency as a healer. If your tank messes up one global cooldown, as a healer, you have 0 counterplay. Your tank goes from 100 to 0. There's just nothing you can do.
That had to have not been their goal. Like, they stated that they wanted healers to like feel like they needed to heal tanks, which I think really that's a combination of that, and also they just wanted tanks to not be like fully self-sufficient, which I kind of get. Even though every time I tank, I think the idea of being self-sufficient is really good. Like, basically, I think tanks should survive in this game if you play well with, like, not passive heals. Like, you know, they want to have, like, a Riptide or a Rejuve or a Life Bloom or just, like, the stuff you would normally put on a target that takes a lot of damage, but they shouldn't be getting spammed with regrowths. Like, that is where I think the balance of healing and tank healing is wrong. Like, anytime you're spamming tanks, but that is true, right? Like, tank healing is one of 2 things. It's like manageable and you're doing it with like the same stuff you would just give anyone who's taking a lot of damage, like the stuff I just, or you're spamming them and they're instantly dying, probably because they're not very good or really undergeared. And that is just not fun at all, right? Like, if you're trying to heal the group and you just have to spam your tank, this is a terrible, yeah, I mean, they just didn't accomplish what they wanted to there.
Also, every other pack having some form of party AoE damage. I don't understand what is the fixation with Blizzard's dungeon design such that you do not want Mythic Plus players to pull big. That is a very strange take. I think most people will agree that big pulls in M Plus equals fun, but this is very deliberate and I do not know why. Then I
think big pulls in Mythic Plus are fun because they're so few and far between. I think it's like a balance. It's like dessert, you know? Dessert is amazing, but you wouldn't want dessert all the time. I think the average pull should be better. I think target counts, like, target caps for classes in this game is like a mistake they made years ago that they still haven't fully figured out how to make work, because like what they wanted to do just didn't end up happening. But I do think that big pulls should happen more often. You should look forward. They should literally design dungeons for a few of them to happen on purpose. They should design them to happen. And there should be more than there is now. But I think the most extreme version of the argument, which is that like every single dungeon should be like pull 20 mobs, next pull 20 mobs, fight boss, and then you just repeat that twice. I actually think that would be more boring than it is now. It would be fun right away, and then it would just be more boring. But I think making sure that there are big pulls in every dungeon is really cool and really important. I mean, reaping is all you need to see to know that that is what people want sometimes, right? Reaping wasn't every single pull is massive, but like 3 or 4 times in the dungeon, there was just the biggest pull of all time. And people still talk about reaping on the level of like Encrypted and Awakened, which is insane. Like those other two things are so much more well designed and are good for the right reasons. And the only reason that reaping is liked, you know, it's like it has so many bad parts on it, but it's just mass pulls are just sick, so that made it good. Like that should tell you enough that, you know, that's clearly something people want to do.
It's also high stress in playing a healer, because a misplay into a wipe again is at least 1.5 minutes gone from your timer, and healers, just like tanks, can be blamed for breaking a key way more than DPS. And because you do not have enough tanks and healers, your DPS, you have too much DPS. They're all sitting in LFG, they're all in Donogal, they're paying a monthly sub, and they're just refreshing and trying to sign up for groups and getting declined, and nobody wants to pay a monthly sub to just wait for groups. So eventually people get bored and they quit Mythic Plus. And they quit the game, maybe. As a Mythic Plus lover, I've been here forever since BFA. This is not sustainable. And I know you're listening, you've listened to us in the past. Hopefully you listen this time around. Then there's poor dungeon design. I don't understand who is picking the dungeons at Blizzard. When Siege of Borealis was announced for The War Within Season 1, everyone started saying that this is a bad choice. Why is Siege of Borealis back? It was one of the most hated BFA dungeons. A lot of unfair mechanics, the hooks, the chains, blah blah blah, yada yada, you get it. Why is it that when you hear feedback from people that this is a bad dungeon, you do nothing to reverse that? I do not understand why. This fixation of bringing back unpopular dungeons versus popular dungeons is weird. If you pull up Shadowlands completion of key...
Okay, I agree. Counter argument. If it is clear for the foreseeable future, and we at least know that retail WoW will be a thing until the end of the World Soul Saga, there's going to be 3 expansions of this, and we know that every season they're bringing back old dungeons. Guys, if they were to just bring back the turbo bangers since when they started rotating dungeons, which I think was the end of Shadowlands, beginning of Dragonflight, we would probably already be out of certified bangers, like right now, right? So like they need to... It's fair to say that maybe Blizzard doesn't know which one is a banger and which one isn't, but I highly, highly doubt that when they're bringing back all these dungeons, they're like, oh my god, this is the dungeon we need to bring back. They're probably like looking a little into the future, and they're like, okay, we need to like give them some dungeons that they really want and look forward to, and like rework some other ones. Not to mention, they've made bad dungeons in the past better. They've also made good dungeons worse. But like, there's been dungeons that I thought were going to be horrible that actually ended up being decent, because I just read the name and I'm like, that dungeon, it wasn't fun, and then they made it way better. So like, I don't know. I don't know if this is actually that big of a deal. Unless you are of the opinion that like they should just identify which dungeons are fucking awesome, don't change them, and like pick like 10 or 12 of them and then just keep rotating those every season rather than bringing back old ones. And I just don't know if I'd agree with that. I could see someone making that argument pretty well though.
I can guarantee you more people did Halls of Atonement versus Theatre of Pain. But why is Theatre of Pain being brought back instead of the more popular Halls of Atonement in Season 2? Surely you have the data. Somewhere in the depths of the Blizzard office, you have the data, but you're making very puzzling decisions. On top of that, why is Workshop coming back for the 3rd time in WoW's history? We already had Workshop coming back as a returning dungeon previously. It's now coming back for the 3rd time. I don't get it. There are more popular dungeons out there. You probably need to spend a bit more time thinking about what dungeons people like based on historical data. Also, for the love of God, the minecart RP in Darkflame Cleft cannot go live. Everything above is...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, what are they going to do with that? The reason I haven't thought about that this much is we haven't tested it yet. And I think about how positive I was that Brackenhide Hollow was going to be the worst dungeon of all time when I saw it on Mythic 0. and then it ended up being arguably the best dungeon of that season. That made me at least know that they only focus on true dungeon design for Mythic Plus on those, like, right before the season they're going to be a thing. Like, I don't think Blizzard was like, we need to make this a good Mythic Plus dungeon now, because why would we? It's not going to be one for 6 months. So my only hope for that is that that hasn't occurred yet. But yeah, just looking at it at face value, it sounds like one of the most annoying and bad Mythic Plus things of all time, for sure. Like, really, really bad.
It's kind of a condensation of thoughts, discussions that every day on stream we kind of have when we do Mythic Plus. But beyond that, there's also some food for thought. These are not suggestions, this is not direct feedback, but it's more related to something you should think about. Class identity is important, we get it, and that's why you want class buff to be specific to class identity, but make it more flexible to invite any comp in Mythic Plus. Bring back the ability for buff scrolls. For example, I don't have a priest, I can bring a stamina buff via a scroll. Yes, it's not as strong as a priest buff, but maybe make it, I don't know, 75% of a priest buff. So that way people won't feel like they're absolutely needed to say, I need a Bloodlust class in my comp. Something like that. Bring back buff scrolls and bring back the improved drums from the past. You also want to spread out your class buffs a bit more, especially the S tier buffs. Like Mark of the Wild maybe shouldn't be a druid thing, maybe the verse buff should be something that is more evenly spread out. I get class identity is important, but think about that. Then there's this whole big debate about solo queue that I don't want to go into in this video. There's plus and minuses, and I'm not decided on this topic either. I think solo queue fragments the community. There'll be people who only do pre-mates and people who only do solo queue. Maybe you need separate ratings for them, but it would definitely kind of solve the problem of people not getting into groups. So it's something to think about as you work on Midnight and the remaining expansions for the World Soul Saga. So with the above, I really hope the War Within Mythic Plus Season 2 picks up. This is our favorite game mode, I think, for all of us across different MMOs. We can't really find something so special. Mythic Plus has so much potential. Let's make it the great game mode it deserves. If you found this helpful, if you enjoyed this video, don't thank me. Thank all the Patreon subscribers, all the YouTube members that you see on screen. These are all the MVPs who make it possible for me to do what I love to do in life, which is to make videos like this for the world.
That's a lot of patrons. God damn. Is Adventurer free? Let's go, Quazii. Dude, the last time this guy, if Adventurers are a paid tier at all, I bet it is, because I think he's a UI guy. He makes like UI and WeakAura videos, and I bet he like gives them to patrons at like the base level. I could see that being paid. All right, well, you know what, Quazii, the last time you were in town with a bunch of other Final Fantasy people, Zeno, Arthars, a few others, Lama Todd, I took them all out to a nice steak dinner and treated them all to that. Quazii, next dinner's on you, big dog. Next dinner's on you, bud. Look at all these fucking patrons. What's going on out here? Goddamn. Okay. Someone said Yoda had one too. Where's the Yoda one? Adventure is €5 a month. Yo. Now keep in mind, guys, Yoda is mostly. I'm assuming this perspective is coming purely from high key players, which is a really, really small amount of the community, but it deserves to be listened to, especially this season when they've literally designed the game for them specifically. They've, for the first time ever, they have had high key players be involved in their decision making for how Mythic Plus's design. So let's hear on. So after Quazii, let's listen a little bit of this.
So my idea is that instead of removing key depletion, we just need to make it easier to get the keys that you want to do. And to do that, I suggested that they add the Keystone vendor, like, you know, the one we have on TR and PTR, to live servers, but you have to add some currency, right? Otherwise you just do the same key over and over. Keys might as well not deplete. So how do you get currency? I was going to call the currency whatever they want, just dust. But my idea is every time you time a key, that's a new high level for you, you get one. That's not the main thing. The main thing would be to encourage people to do keys that they've already timed. Because right now, right, if you're in LFG and you're doing Party Finder, you're not signing up for a key that's not AO for you. There's no point, right? Like, why would you? I mean, you could do it for love of the game, which, you know, sometimes I do that.
Dust is acquired by timing a key that's the new highest level for you equals 1 dust. Timing a key that's the same as your best run, but someone else got IO equals 3 dust. Oh, okay, is -1 level from your best run, but someone else got IO 2 and 1. Changing key map costs 2 dust. Increase key level by 1 equals 5. You get your max reward, but not multiple rewards for each dungeon. Dust resets every week to prevent stockpiling.
But most people are just like, no, I'd rather go play PO or something. So the idea behind this is to reward people for signing up for keys and timing keys that they've already done. So if you time it,
making homework keys better. Oh yeah, I mean actually, I mean, so well, not even making homework keys better. You have to think about it. If you're playing for score, why do people just leave after one wipe in keys that they've already timed before, right? Because the only reason to do that key was to get the other key that they wanted to do. So this gets you a way to target keys, but it also, maybe most importantly, incentivizes players who have already completed a key to just play that key for the love of the game, to just give you some kind of reward for that. And the reward is you're getting dust because someone in there needs that key, which will, I mean, it's not a terrible cook. This would certainly liven up the group finder, right? Because I mean, if your only goal for getting keys is IO, but now there's just this other resource you could get, and it's by doing keys you've already done, that massively increases the amount of people in the group finder, right?
Key that's IO for someone else, but it's the same as your best run, you get 3 points. Or 3 dust. -1.
And then you're also obtaining a resource that makes it easier for you to get the keys that you... Dude, this is... Ignore all low keys, just high keys specifically, because that's where the perspective he's coming from. This is a really good idea, isn't it? Can anyone think of a negative? What's the negative?
2 dust. -2
I'm
levels,
sure there
you
is
get
one, I just
dust.
haven't.
And what can you use this dust for? You can use this dust at the Keystone vendor, and you should have scrolls, 8 scrolls, 1 for every map. It costs 2 dust to change the key to map. It's like just basically a free reroll, except to the correct key level, the key you want.
All right, total tangent here, guys, but I'm texting someone, and they said, I know you already explained this, but why fuck Walmart again? Question mark. Guys, how the fuck do I respond to that? How do you explain to someone that doesn't really know gaming or game culture that much why we were saying fuck Walmart after we killed all those bosses? It's not easy. Just say fuck Walmart. All right, slamming it. I'll let you know how that goes.
So to change the key map, it's 2 dust. And to increase the key level by 1, it's 5 dust. So let's say you just depleted, like, your my group, right? And you just depleted 19 wake for fucking hours. And you have 3 18 wakes. Well, everyone could go do homework and help out LFG for a little bit, and then come back with 19 wakes the next day.
I guess maybe that would be the negative, is like you're splitting your group up to go farm dust. But like that does get more people in the group finder, but like I could see it being like, okay, let's say you're someone who likes playing with your group and you always do your stuff in your group, but now like the idea is you split up from your group because like those people don't need IO, so it's kind of impossible for you guys to farm dust as a group. So you have to go farm it with pugs. We just talked earlier about how a lot of people play this game to play with their friends, right? Is it possible that like going into pugs, which may not be the best, most fun environment, even though this would increase the average quality of pugs for sure if everyone was committing to this, but like isn't that maybe a negative? Or alts? You'd log on your alts, which is actually kind of good because I know like in a lot of high key groups, people do like to kind of shuffle their alts in to mix things up, which would be a good reason to do that. This is sounding like a good idea.
Friends out, which, you know, people want to do. They just need a little bit of help from Blizzard to like make a system that actually rewards them for that. Anyway, that was my idea. So the whole point of this would be, number 1, depleting a key doesn't feel as bad, right? Because if you deplete a key, you can just go do some charity work. Oops. Go do some charity work, farm some dust, and then push your key back up. Number 2, people won't be just AFKing in Dornigal, refreshing the party finder, waiting for a key that's IO for them. They'll actually like be encouraged to play the game, which is what we want. We want more people playing the game and not AFKing in Dornigal. Yeah, and then also obviously we need this dust and all the scrolls are reset every week, so you don't like do a bunch of stuff at the beginning of the season to like save up scrolls or whatever. Okay, and then there's a couple other things I wanted to suggest, which are Challenger's Peril is fucking dog shit. Why do we have 15 seconds for every death? It just makes deaths wipes way more punishing, makes you gatekeep people into their keys way more, and it just makes it so if you ever die as a tank, the key is just instantly over. Almost all the time. And then also the fix that they did, quote unquote fix, was extremely hilarious because it does nothing. They said for all keys where Challenger's Peril is active, you get 130 extra in the key. Well, guess what? For any key that's remotely difficult, Challenger's Peril is in the key. So all they effectively did was just add a 130 to every single key. They didn't actually fix the problem.
This is the same take Dorky made. And both Dratnos and I kind of deconstructed this thing. I probably won't do it again because that was just on the podcast and we've had this exact same conversation, but I actually don't understand this logic at all.
Is that deaths are way too punishing.
Like, I understand the logic of they could have made a better change, but the high key, like, why this was a bad change thing, it totally makes no sense.
Okay, anyway, I think they've heard enough of that. Everyone has basically told them that without me telling them that. Then we also have buff tanks and healers. It feels really bad as a DPS player, you know, enhanced shaman main here. When you're tanked,
what a season to play enhanced shaman. What an amazing class.
Where your tank just dies, or like you just don't get healed for a thing, and you just have no agency in the key. They should make it a lot easier for people to survive keys, and that makes it so that, you know, if you are a DPS player that's playing really well, doing high damage or something, or if you're a tank that does high damage, then you can make up for like having poor defensive play by doing more damage, I guess. For instance, like if your tank just gets one shot on a pull, it's over, right? You can't time the key anymore. No one else in the key mattered at all except for that tank. But if they make it so the tank is never getting one shot on the pull, maybe just instead he's like requiring more healing or something, and that makes your healer's damage go down, then it's a lot worse, right? You'll be a lot better. Everyone else has agency in the key. You can at least play the game even if your tank sucks. And then
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a rebuttal to buff tanks and healers. Sounds good. Well, the buffing healers things is weird, right? Because there's like an entire conversation around the power and spikiness of healers, but most of that is having to happen because of the way that the game design is made, like the fight design, the damage you're intaking. We already talked about it, like the close relationship between how your character is designed to heal versus how the things are designed to do damage to you in the game, and how those are like very similar or very important that they work together. And then we've talked about that spreadsheet that Jack brought up where, you know, like the ratio of your HPS to the max health has like gone down massively since Sepulcher, and how healing in general in Mythic Plus and everywhere else felt better before then. And so buffing healers isn't necessarily the move. Actually, like the strong argument is to actually keep healers the same, but massively buff our HP to have things work like they used to. But then that's not exactly the case because we have so many defensives and cooldowns at the talent tree now. It's weird, but
other thing,
that's a very complicated problem.
class balance is fucking complete trash right now. The OP specs like Enhanced Shaman, Ellie Shaman, the DKs, Rogue, and Mage are way too much better than everything than other DPS. But that's not even the bad part. The bad part is tanks and healers. Like Prot Paladin is legit feels like the only tank that is actually playable in high keys. Like if Prot Paladin wasn't buffed to like the level that it is right now, you just couldn't even do high keys because these other tanks can't even survive them, which is not what we want. We don't want to be gated by tank survivability. We want to be gated by, you know, sometimes tank survivability, but not every single key, like every single pull of every single key. We want it to be like a problem sometimes. Whereas other times, maybe you're gated by not having enough damage. Healer balance is a little bit better, and it's also a little bit forgiving, mainly because the best tank at the moment is Prot Paladin, but it also...
That's such a good point. Like, how lucky are we that they made kicks matter more in Mythic Plus than ever before, right at the exact same time as the class that happens to be the best, which, let's be real, you're going to bring the tank that like is the best combination of does the most damage and is the tankiest. Like, yeah, stops are important, but like you'd be like, even with Demon Hunter last expansion, you'd be surprised how quickly people will move off of a tank and say like, oh, you can never not play this because it has so much utility, and then how quickly people will just play the other one because it does slightly more damage. So like, how lucky are we that paladins just massively interrupt everything important, when even in a season when they've buffed how much better interrupts are than like stops, for example, and like that happens to be the tank that's just BIS anyway. Your interaction with dungeons would be totally fucking different if Prot Paladin wasn't BIS, and even another tank was just as strong damage reduction and damage outgoing wise. It's so broken.
It kind of sucks this season too. All right, that is what I came up with, I guess, to help fix Mythic Plus. Right now, Mythic Plus, I don't really have stats because I don't have access to API or whatever, but I'm pretty sure Mythic Plus interest is an all-time low right now. They made a lot of bad decisions going into this expansion, and this is how to save it. All right, thank you for coming.
It's one way of how to say. Yeah, I mean, I think that perspective is nice, especially from like a higher key range. I've played with Yoda a decent bit. I played with him in Final Fantasy. He was our healer for E12S, I think, and E11. And then I know a lot of people in my guild have done keys with him, but yeah. All right, W.